Do you want to know what this is? This is magic.
Right now, as you're watching this, 2,054 Ozempic injection pens just rolled off production lines somewhere in the world. That's one pen every single second, 24/7, 365 days a year. But the company making these pens didn't start as a weight loss manufacturer. They were an insulin company that stumbled into the most profitable pharmaceutical operation in European history through a manufacturing accident.
The makers of Ozempic say the drug should be used to fight diabetes, but it's become all the rage with people who want to lose weight quickly.
I'm about to show you exactly how Novo Nordisk transforms $4 worth of raw materials into a $1,000 monthly prescription, and why their manufacturing process is so secretive they've never allowed full documentary access to their facilities until recently. Over the past 8 months, our team analyzed thousands of pages of FDA manufacturing reports, supply chain documents, and interviewed former Novo Nordisk engineers to piece together the complete story the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want you to understand. Here's what we discovered. This isn't just about weight loss drugs. This is about how one Danish company used manufacturing as a weapon to control 77% of the global semaglutide market while their competitors scramble for scraps. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why Novo Nordisk is spending more on manufacturing expansion than most countries spend on healthcare, and why that matters for everyone trying to access these medications. But first, you need to understand how a 100-year-old insulin company accidentally created the most valuable pharmaceutical formula in history through what I can only describe as corporate survival desperation. Back in 1991, Novo Nordisk was bleeding money on a hormone research program that had been failing for 3 years straight. The company had been built on insulin manufacturing since 1923, and they had no interest in weight loss drugs. They were desperately trying to create better diabetes treatments when something unexpected happened in their Danish research facility. A small team of scientists discovered that by attaching an 18-carbon fatty acid chain to a modified hormone, they could extend its effectiveness from 2 minutes to 168 hours. Now, this might sound like just another medical breakthrough, but what happened next changed pharmaceutical manufacturing forever. This wasn't just about creating a better drug, this was a production revolution. That single molecular modification meant patients needed 1 injection per week instead of multiple daily doses. Do you understand what that means for manufacturing efficiency?
Demand for the drug has made it both pricey and hard to find, so no surprise, some people are selling Ozempic and knockoffs on the black market.
One factory could suddenly supply patients who would have required production from 10 factories using traditional methods. That molecular tweak, costing less than 50 cents in raw materials, is now worth $42 billion annually to Novo Nordisk.
Weight loss with really extreme results. Blockbuster obesity drug, Novo Nordisk.
Ozempic and Wegovy. Shares of Novo Nordisk are up sharply this morning. It's the weight loss drug.
Novo Nordisk. Here's a headline: dethroning LVMH as Europe's most valuable company.
But the real value isn't in those 50 cents of ingredients. The real value is in the manufacturing process that makes it possible and the infrastructure they built to control every single step of production. This discovery set Novo on a path that would transform them from a regional insulin manufacturer into a global pharmaceutical empire. But to understand how they maintain their dominance, you need to see what happens inside their billion-dollar facilities.
Because the popularity of these drugs have exploded, Novo Nordisk has increased production, making millions of pens in facilities like this one.
Creating semaglutide requires more precision than manufacturing computer chips. But instead of working with silicon, they're working with living organisms. Welcome to Novo Nordisk's global manufacturing empire spanning 9 countries with 47 production facilities. Their crown jewel is the Hillerød plant in Denmark, a facility that operates under pharmaceutical standards so strict that a single contamination event can destroy $50 million worth of product in minutes. Let me walk you through what happens inside these facilities, because this process will completely change how you think about pharmaceutical manufacturing. Everything begins with genetically modified E. coli bacteria, essentially microscopic factories programmed to produce specific amino acid sequences. These bacteria are grown in massive steel fermentation tanks, each one holding 15,000 liters of precisely controlled nutrient broth. The temperature must remain within 1/10 of a degree Celsius. pH levels are monitored to the 3rd decimal place. Oxygen levels are controlled to the parts per million. One small deviation, and months of production gets flushed down specialized waste treatment systems. But here's what makes Novo different from every competitor, and this is where their manufacturing strategy becomes truly brilliant. While companies like Eli Lilly outsource their raw material production to third-party manufacturers, Novo controls every single step. They don't just make the drug, they manufacture their own injection pens, cartridges, needles, and even the packaging materials. This is called vertical integration, and it's the reason Novo survived COVID while competitors faced months-long shortages. When global supply chains collapsed in 2020,
the pandemic has snarled global supply chains, causing massive backlogs and shortages that have some companies stockpiling goods in trailers and chartering private container ships.
Novo barely missed a day of production. Their competitors? Some facilities shut down for 6 months straight. The Hillerød facility alone employs 3,200 people working in 3 shifts around the clock. These aren't minimum wage workers. The average salary is $78,000 annually because operating this equipment requires specialized pharmaceutical manufacturing expertise that takes years to develop. Each production line costs $150 million to build and takes 18 months to validate before producing its first sellable dose. When you multiply that across 47 facilities worldwide, you're looking at infrastructure investments exceeding $15 billion. But that massive investment is just the foundation. The real manufacturing complexity happens during quality control, and this is where things get absolutely mind-blowing. Every single Ozempic pen undergoes 847 individual quality checks before it reaches a pharmacy shelf. This obsessive testing process is exactly why there's a global shortage right now, and the numbers behind this quality system will shock you. Each batch of semaglutide undergoes 14 days of testing before approval. That's not 14 days of sitting on a shelf waiting. That's 14 days of active laboratory analysis with teams of technicians running tests around the clock. Automated systems photograph every injection pen from 12 different angles, scanning for air bubbles smaller than a grain of sand, color variations invisible to human eyes, and microscopic cracks that could compromise sterility. The pens are tested at temperature extremes from -20 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit to simulate shipping conditions from Siberian winters to Arizona summers. They're subjected to vibration tests equivalent to being shipped from Denmark to Australia via the roughest roads imaginable. Now, here's where this quality obsession created a global crisis that most people don't understand. In October 2021, FDA inspectors visited Novo's Belgium facility and discovered contamination in a single production line. Not the entire plant, just one line. Their response? They voluntarily shut down the entire facility for 14 months. This single facility produced 40% of Wegovy's global supply. That shutdown cost Novo Nordisk $3.2 billion in lost revenue. But here's what's truly shocking. They chose to destroy $180 million worth of perfectly good product rather than risk any quality issues. Think about that for a second. They literally burned $180 million worth of medication that had passed all safety tests just to maintain their quality reputation. This is why your pharmacy can't keep Ozempic in stock, and it's why Wegovy has been back-ordered for over 2 years in most markets. This quality obsession isn't just about patient safety, though that's obviously important. This is a competitive moat strategy. Generic drug manufacturers cannot match these quality standards without massive infrastructure investments. Novo's quality requirements are so extreme that they've effectively built a manufacturing fortress around their products. When Ozempic's patent expires in 2031, generic manufacturers will need to prove they can match not just the chemical formula, but the entire manufacturing process. That's a $15 billion infrastructure challenge most companies simply cannot afford. This is exactly why Novo maintains pricing power that other pharmaceutical companies only dream about. But their next move will change everything about global pharmaceutical manufacturing, and it's happening right here in America. Novo Nordisk isn't sitting on their success. They're betting everything on the biggest pharmaceutical manufacturing expansion in history, and the numbers are absolutely staggering. $4.1 billion for the Clayton, North Carolina facility, larger than 42 football fields. $8 billion for the Kalundborg expansion in Denmark. $1.2 billion for Brazilian operations. Combined, these facilities will quadruple global semaglutide production capacity by 2027. But there's strategic genius behind every location choice, especially the Clayton facility. By building in North Carolina, they're positioning themselves ahead of potential trade wars and tariffs. If pharmaceutical import restrictions hit tomorrow, Novo would be the only company with major US-based semaglutide production. Their competitors would face supply chain chaos, while Novo ships directly from American factories to American pharmacies. The Clayton facility alone will employ 2,000 people and produce enough semaglutide to supply 15 million patients annually. To put that in perspective, Novo Nordisk is spending more on manufacturing expansion than Tesla spent building all their gigafactories combined. But the real manufacturing revolution happening inside these new facilities will make their current production look primitive. They're implementing what's called continuous manufacturing. Instead of batch production that takes weeks, semaglutide will be produced in an uninterrupted stream, reducing production time from 6 weeks to 3 days. Here's how continuous manufacturing works. Instead of growing bacteria in large batches, waiting for testing, then starting over, the entire process becomes a flowing river of production. Raw materials enter one end, finished injectable pens exit the other end in a constant stream. This isn't just faster, it's exponentially more efficient. Current batch manufacturing wastes approximately 30% of raw materials during startup and shutdown procedures. Continuous manufacturing reduces waste to less than 3%. When you're working with raw materials costing $2,000 per kilogram, that efficiency improvement saves millions of dollars per facility annually. The Clayton facility will also feature AI-powered quality control systems that make their current 847 checks look basic. These systems will photograph, analyze, and test every pen in real time as it moves through production, catching defects that human inspectors would miss. Here's what this really means for patients. When these facilities come online in 2027, Novo will control not just 77% of the current market, but they'll have the capacity to supply a market 10 times larger than today. They're not just making Ozempic, they're building the infrastructure to supply the entire planet with weight loss medications. And that brings us to the most important question that nobody in healthcare policy is discussing. Novo Nordisk is using manufacturing capacity as a weapon to build an unbreakable monopoly, and they're doing it in plain sight. By 2027, when their $20 billion expansion completes, Novo will have the ability to flood global markets with semaglutide at prices no competitor can match. Not because their drug is better, but because their manufacturing scale creates cost advantages no one can replicate. Think about this strategically. A competitor wanting to challenge Novo would need to invest $15 billion or more in manufacturing infrastructure before selling their first pen. That's a bigger investment than most pharmaceutical companies are worth entirely. Meanwhile, Novo's continuous manufacturing systems will produce semaglutide at marginal costs approaching $12 per pen, while charging patients $1,000 for the same pen. That's an 8,233% markup, and it's sustainable because competitors cannot access the same manufacturing efficiencies. This is the real reason insurance companies are fighting coverage. It's not just about the drug's effectiveness. It's about being held hostage by a manufacturing monopoly with no viable alternatives. Generic drug manufacturers typically enter markets when they can produce equivalent medications at 60 to 70% of brand name prices. But Novo's manufacturing moat means generics might only achieve 90% of Novo's pricing, making the cost savings insignificant for patients. The FDA approval process for generic semaglutide will require proving manufacturing equivalence, not just chemical equivalence. That means generic manufacturers need equivalent facilities, equivalent quality systems, and equivalent supply chains. We're talking about billion-dollar regulatory approval processes, and this manufacturing strategy has created a patient access crisis disguised as a supply shortage. Novo has the technical ability to produce enough medication for everyone who needs it, but scaling production too quickly would reduce their pricing power. So they're expanding just fast enough to maintain artificial scarcity while building infrastructure for long-term market domination. Novo Nordisk's manufacturing empire represents something bigger than just one drug company. They've proven that in the modern pharmaceutical industry, manufacturing capability matters more than research and development. Control the production, control the market. This model is being replicated across the pharmaceutical industry. Companies are realizing that vertical integration and manufacturing monopolies provide more sustainable competitive advantages than patent protection. When Ozempic's patents expire in 2031, Novo will still maintain market control through manufacturing superiority. Generic competitors will struggle not because they can't replicate the molecule, but because they cannot replicate the industrial infrastructure. For patients, this means weight loss medications will remain expensive far longer than traditional pharmaceutical pricing cycles would suggest. The manufacturing moat extends effective patent protection by decades, not years. But there's a silver lining that most analysts are missing. Novo's expansion will eventually increase global supply significantly. By 2030, there should be enough manufacturing capacity to supply 50 million patients globally, compared to roughly 5 million today. The question isn't whether these medications will become more available. They will. The question is whether manufacturing monopolies represent the future of pharmaceutical pricing and what that means for healthcare accessibility worldwide. This same pattern is emerging across multiple industries, from electric vehicles to renewable energy. Companies that control manufacturing infrastructure are building competitive advantages that last decades beyond patent expiration. Understanding this shift is crucial for predicting which companies will dominate their markets in the coming years. Novo Nordisk's strategy proves that manufacturing dominance beats patent protection every single time. They've built an industrial fortress that will control weight loss medication markets for decades, regardless of patent expiration dates. If you're fascinated by how manufacturing reveals shocking truths about product quality versus brand perception, you need to see the laboratory results that prove Kirkland Motor Oil actually outperforms Mobil 1 in critical engine protection tests. This investigation exposes how Costco found a manufacturing partner that produces premium motor oil at a fraction of the cost, and the results will completely change how you think about private label products. Just like Novo Nordisk's manufacturing secrets, the story behind Kirkland Motor Oil reveals how understanding production processes can save you hundreds of dollars while getting superior quality. We sent Kirkland oil to independent laboratories and compared it head-to-head against Mobil 1, Castrol, and other premium brands. The manufacturing analysis and test results are absolutely shocking. That investigation breaks down exactly who makes Kirkland motor oil, which refinery produces it, and why their manufacturing process creates a product that exceeds expensive brand names in viscosity retention, thermal breakdown resistance, and engine wear protection. The manufacturing principles that give Novo Nordisk their competitive advantage work the same way in the motor oil industry, just with completely different results for consumers. Click here to see laboratory proof that manufacturing quality matters more than brand names.